Funding for NotAVampyre is provided by viewers like you. Find perks and tiers at patreon.com/NotAVampyre. Thank you. 2 long years later, and I finally give the answer to the question no one was asking. What is the true prequel to Love Never Dies? Well, it's a David Stoller Phantom of the Opera from 1991, but more on that at the end. If you want a brief overview of the guy who made this happen, how he's got more money than sense, and other small tidbits about the show, then check out Musical Hell's review of it. All I'm gonna say on the matter is that this film's stage production was so obviously born from the earth-shattering success of Andrew Lloyd Webber's show of the same name that even the box art from the DVD go out of its way to trick unsuspecting buyers into thinking they're getting that version instead. I mean, just look at this quote. Strange how it happens to include Michael Crawford and Sarah Brightman, the two who happen to be the original leads in the show that was the Hamilton of the 80s. In this half mask, it's very notable that before the Lloyd Webber version, all Phantoms wore full face masks of some sort, even when only part of their face was scarred or deformed. And if you really want to get into the seemingly uncanny coincidences, totally not the same thing as or the focus on Christine's red scarf as being the impetus for hers and Rawls' relationship.
You retrieved a scarf that the wind carried away?
Yes, it was a red scarf.
Look, I have kept it always.
Well, you can't have lost it. After all the trouble I took, I was just 14 and soaked to the skin.
Because you had run into the sea to fetch my scarf.
Okay, now that the obvious, totally not a rip-offness is addressed, I guess I can finally talk about the show proper. It doesn't start off strong with a pantomime sequence in which some dancers act out Christine and Rawl meeting and her father telling her about the spirit of music. Not only is Rawl's speaking portion pretty painful to listen to due to the fact that his actor really can't act, and the script tries to be all artistic by over-exaggerating his supposed deep love for Christine.
That song you sing, music from heaven. Can there be something so perfect in such an imperfect world? Such a perfect one is she. One day, I will find her again.
But I can't help but wonder, what was the point of all this? What was accomplished or conveyed by this scene? I only knew these two were Rawl and Christine when I first watched it because I'm very familiar with the Phantom canon. Someone for whom this is their first exposure to the Phantom of the Opera story will be lost as to who these people are and why they matter. Why should you care about this guy's vow to find a woman again who he barely knows? The ballet pantomime looks nice enough, but it adds nothing to the show, which is a terrible way to start considering this is the audience's first impression of the musical they'll be watching. It doesn't help that the lyrics of the song don't really flow well.
One day, thereafter, you will sing your lavish song, so lovely, child.
Like, I get what they're trying to convey, but it clearly needed more workshopping to not just match the tune, but also to match the meter of the lines coming before and after. I can't even tell if the lines rhyme with how disjointed it all sounds to my ears. And then we get a scene where Christine and the Phantom meet for the first time. Why? To pay off the Dia Angel music tune that we just heard? To set up how Madame Giry is a total Phantom stan? To underline the danger of giving into a random voice claiming they'll help you sing?
But you must be careful. Careful? It's only music. What could possibly happen?
Why, anything, my dear. Remember, nothing is free. And for a gift from heaven, there can be hell to pay.
It's just so heavy-handed in how the show tries to play up how dangerous the situation is by words alone, and we never get payoff for why Madame Giry knows of the Phantom, warns Christine about him, or why she even puts it in the chorus girl's head that he is the spirit of music. Hell, I really have no clue, even after watching the show many times over the years, why she later tries to convince the ballerinas they don't need to fear him. Was she too chosen by him like Christine is now, and that's how she just knows all these things that kinda won't matter after this scene, even though the dialogue tries to convince you that it will? The duet the two leads share sound nice enough, but the song is still not memorable. Even when watching the sequence to describe what I don't like, I can't get myself to care about it. Elizabeth Walsh and David Stoller sound nice enough, though Stallers' vibrato gets in the way sometimes, but the lyrics just get lost in the sheer dominance of the instruments and how the players don't enunciate well. That and the show often has Walsh singing so high that I can't parse the lyrics. Then again, I suspect that's a little bit of a me thing. Honestly, I think the show should have opened with the ballet dancers singing about the strange going-ons in the opera house. Not just for the sake of being like the book, but mainly because the song actually sets up the dynamics that will be relevant to the rest of the musical. How the ballerinas fear the Phantom and spread rumors of his inhumanity. How the opera house is currently in a state of chaos. That there's a strange dude in a cloak poking about. Introduces the red-scarfed stagehand and the managers. And presents the plot point of a benefit concert that Christine might replace Carlotta at. It's by no means a perfect number, as again the instrumentals get in the way of understanding the ballet girls as they sing. And they too often go so high in their register that I at least find it hard to understand them. Then again, at the very least, the song is semi-memorable with the slightly spooky nature of the music. The important part is that it does what any good musical also partakes in its opening moments. It introduces the world we'll be living in for the next couple of hours and establishes the major characters we'll be following. It's not a strict rule, and even the ALW Phantom doesn't do this, but it's a simple, effective way to express to the audience who you need to care about and to set the stage for the story that's about to unfold. Give them enough information to understand who and what most everyone is and why they're involved in the narrative. Again, those who don't have outside context are still wondering who the creepy guy on the beach was. I also need to mention the weird timeline suggested by the time card. So the ballet took place in 1901, then suddenly we cut to an older Christine in her dressing room at the Paris Opera House. How old? We don't know because there's no convenient time card until the next scene with the dancers practicing supposedly 10 years later. But is it 10 years later from the beach scene or from when the Phantom and Christine met? Are you telling me after 10 years of vocal lessons only now is Christine moving out of the chorus? And that in all that time, the Phantom, whose idol in this version is Don freaking Juan, had the restraint to not take her down below? Maybe it's a wrongly placed time skip and the dressing room scene was meant to be 10 years after Raul and Christine meet? It makes the most sense to me, but then again, who needs a time jump if you just cut those scenes out entirely? Bouquet in this version isn't that great. The guy who plays him also struggles to act like he's not just reading words someone else wrote, and it can only be partially forgiven by the fact that his character is supposed to be a drunk. His half attempt at a French accent stands out too much, and his tripping over a trap door looks more like he just gave up. Part of me hates to say it, but the banter between the managers isn't that funny. Sometimes there's cute back and forths that still get a chuckle out of me, but then other times their humor is just so childish. I feel like I'm watching two big babies argue over nothing in their big comedy number. I do appreciate how the dichotomy between the bootlicking socialite and the socially inept but books-minded both creates tension but work well enough to the point where one could not run the opera house without the other. But then again, I find myself bored with just watching them whine about my spectacles, my program. The scene only serves to show the managers getting played with by the Phantom and exists to add in that supposedly important bit where he demands to be paid a salary, but does it very poorly because the fools still think the other manager is setting all of this up. And why is the Phantom only now requesting a salary after 10 long years or however long it's been? I do like David Stallers' bit of the song and admit it's a little catchy, but again, it serves no purpose to the show as a whole. The only callback we get later is the Phantom passing the managers at the masquerade and mentioning the 20,000 francs. Honestly, the musical wouldn't have lost anything if the song was cut. But then again, that's 3 scenes cut from the show that already barely manages to reach the 90-minute mark. Maybe I wouldn't hate the song so much if it weren't so long and drawn out. Just like in the 25th anniversary production, I don't like the blocking around the in-universe audience. Like, I get it. The crew wanted us to be able to see into Christine's dressing room so that when she's rushed on stage, we can hear the Phantom prepping her for her big debut. But before that moment, the real audience viewing the musical have to endure the managers talking with their backs to us, and Carlotta performing to a wall. And it's a damn shame because I like the song and how this Carlotta sings it. They're breaking a major rule of stagecraft, and they're doing it badly. We don't need to see the stagehands getting messed with when the same effect could be achieved with offstage crashing, and the manager's telling Carlotta to just keep going. Hell, if we still want to see the Phantom's shenanigans, we could have the stagehands and other performers standing off to the side in a way that suggests they're not on stage, like in the Takarazuka Phantom. Even the 25th anniversary show knew not to have Christine sing her entire aria to a wall. It makes it even stranger when suddenly Christine is singing to, and Mr. Richard addresses the actual audience watching the musical. Again, I need to rotate my mapping of the stage in order to try to get this to make sense. Also, the way the Phantom spooks Bouquet into ruining Carlotta's song is pretty lame. No real threats, just chatting about how to ruin her day like a water cooler jerk salty about his bossy boss. Could have achieved the same effect of scaring the guy with something more ghost-like. Hearing a strange, unrecognized voice is pretty frightening, especially when you realize its owner is right behind you, but it becomes less scary if it just says,
You will do it!
The weird after effects is clearly a case of they focused so much on what they could do, they didn't stop to think if they should. Now's a good time to talk about one of my favorite Carlottas in the Phantom canon. In this version, she's still unlikable with how the thought of doing a benefit concert is repulsive, and how she treats everyone around her like they're dirt. But like a good performer, she tries to give the crowd what they paid to see, even as she keeps getting interrupted by the Phantom's shenanigans. She keeps singing even as the Phantom throws his voice over hers during the masquerade. And her song about the struggles of being an abled woman gives so much light into why she is the way she has been through the show. Carlotta knows this is a man's world, and that those in power will always prefer pretty young girls to proven, older powerhouses of ability. That once you cross a certain age, things you were once praised for will be quickly forgotten for someone with more youth, regardless of experience. I mean, we see this so often reflected in our world where in Hollywood female leads are often far younger than their male counterparts, and how historically female actresses were considered old by 30. Meryl Streep initially didn't want to play the witch from Into the Woods because one of the few roles allotted to women over 40 is acting as a witch. Carlotta's song suggests that her snobbery and scoffing at Christine's ability as a singer is out of self-preservation. She sees which way the winds are turning. She's been in this industry long enough to not only know that she's the only one who will advocate for her, but that her time as prima donna is dependent on how long her managers remain interested in her. It's a known feature of the world she lives in. And so Carlotta is unsurprised but still heartbroken that today she's the abled woman being replaced not based on her merit as performer, but because someone new and exciting came around. True, she's still hard to work with, but you can't blame her really. We see sets almost fall on her and her performance continually interrupted supposedly by her clumsy and inept coworkers. Can you really blame her for wanting Bouquet fired after all of this? It also helps that this song is more competently written than others.
Twitter and blush, grumble and curse. Lady, it's worse than you know.
Its words flow more pleasantly, and I can actually understand what she is singing. In other words, hashtag Carlotta was robbed. Christine's debut song is, well, it's a nice English rendition of Ach ist Fust by Mozart, or at least I think it is because she gets drowned out by Raul going on about how he really loves Christine. Again, I get the sense that this part is included because in the ALW show, Raul has a short interlude during Think of Me where he recognizes his childhood sweetheart. But in that show, Raul's part is short, sweet, and doesn't overtake Christine's singing. It comes in what seems to be the instrumental break in the song, but here, Raul is being the jerk in the theater who won't shut up and enjoy the movie. It's a shame because this Christine doesn't really get a song to herself in this whole show. Every song she sings, be it her benefit concert debut or her introspection regarding her spirit of music, someone else always eventually cuts in. They're all inevitably duets, which kind of leaves her character feeling more empty than of the ALW fandom. And that Christine hardly had any character written for her either. Sure, I can piece together from her dialogue that she's taken with the Phantom's pursuit of perfect music while also having the whimsy of youth, wanting to enjoy the world and empathizing with the rejection of it at least a little. All I'm saying is that this Christine isn't so weak vocally as to need Raul to constantly butt in. In other versions, I at worst don't mind Raul. He's just nice. He's the archetypal hero whose only sin is that he isn't darkly mysterious and sexy like the Phantom. But here, he's so fop. He's just a rich boy who sees a pretty girl and is so forward with his affections that it becomes creepy. I don't know, maybe I'd feel some real sexual tension if this Raul could act.
I thought I would choke on the stuffiness of that insufferable party.
And I was choking with anticipation of getting you alone. That song you sing. Music from heaven. Can there be something so perfect in such an imperfect world?
But still, I'm bothered how he turns the struggles of a possessive fandom into his own plight because he assumes that he has a deeper relationship with Christine than has been demonstrated, or how upset he becomes when it's suggested that Christine may have another suitor. And then the sleazy way he deprecates himself that prompts Christine to fan his ego. The trouble is that this show wants the relationship that Christine and Raul have in the ALW show, where they're separated for years and are able to fan the flames of love enough to rival the love that the Phantom claims to have for Christine. The trouble is that these two weren't childhood sweethearts or even friends. He listened to her sing once, and then they were parted for at least 10 years. Their relationship is still building. If this were The Sims, at most they'd only be friends. Nowhere near enough relationship points to woohoo. And because we don't have this previous attachment on Christine's end for Raul, he comes off as legit over-assuming his importance to Christine as a possible lover and being way too pushy. It just so happens that she's receptive to his advances because at least he's not demanding all of her soul or aim to keep her for himself. Raul at least is recognizing that she should be able to have a career even if it means others will fall in love with her and her voice like he has. It also helps that he's offering a more normie romantic dynamic than the one the Phantom desires. Speaking of which, the first layer scene is one of the best in the whole show, possibly only second to the other layer scene in my opinion. It's by far one of the best written scenes in the whole show, and it's also best acted. Except for some slight overacting by David Staller, you see why these two were cast in these roles and what this show could have been with better talent and if the rest of the script was up to the level of what we see here. I love how the Phantom explains who he is to someone he thinks is approaching his level. Someone who he thinks can understand why he's decided to shun the outside world and devote himself entirely to his crafts. And Christine is visibly not okay with being brought to such a strange place by a strange man who refers to himself as a monster while also wanting to know what he is and not entirely fearing him. It's enthralling to see the small debate about what each person took away from the story of Don Juan. Christine knowing him as being weak and hedonistic, while the Phantom admiring his boundless passion and his lack of inhibition in pursuing what made him happy. It honestly makes sense for someone who already sees no reason to adhere to the rules of a society that's deemed him an outcast merely for his face to use this reading of Don Juan to justify turning from those who would scorn his pursuit of perfect music. And it makes sense that he wants to steer Christine away from that world. He sees himself in her, a person capable of great feats of artistry, but who will be held back by a society that prefers surface-level beauty. He believes Christine is someone who could thrive in an isolation with him where her inner passions are not caged by people who want art to look a certain way. Basically, he wants to quarantine with her. But the Phantom still wants to possess her. He frames it in terms of showing her some sort of enlightenment, but at the end of the day, he still wants Christine all to himself. He wants to be the only one her passions are directed towards. She must sing only for the Phantom, even when performing on stage. Next to Carlotta's song, Diet Music of the Night is one of my favorite pieces from this musical. David Staller's voice can be lovely and enchanting, as is the first half of the song. It tries to lull you into trusting the Phantom and agreeing with his worldview, to seduce Christine into spending the rest of her days down below in a world of the Phantom. And then, when the honey is rejected, we see the Phantom temporarily wounded by this notion that his protege doesn't want what he offers, and then he flames his ego to recover. He is perfect, and Christine is just afraid of the intensity of it all. She just needs to come to love him as he knows she's capable of. He believes Raul could never be an honest rival for Christine's affection as he sees the guy as an utter normie, unlike him and Magda, but still wants to keep an eye on her. There's still this part of the Phantom that wants to make sure that she doesn't give into her fear of her own passions or become corrupted by Raul. And really, can you blame Christine for not taking that well? For distrusting this man who claims to be near godlike? To want to unmask the secrets he withholds from her? There's real pain in the Phantom when the thing he knew would happen came to fruition. This one, the one he thought who would reject surface-level beauty, even turned from his face. At first he's angry that she didn't listen, but then just immensely saddened by the thought that, at the end of the day, Christine is like all of the rest. And then Christine works through her inner terror to find the man behind the deformity, to understand the harm that she did him by unmasking his trauma without his consent, and to look upon his face without running away, to admit that she was wrong for stealing his mask. But I'm sure that the Phantom took this to mean that she chose to stay with him forever as the scene fades to black. Honestly, it's a very touching moment, though I'm sure it only happened because Lloyd Webber also did it. As many others have pointed out, the masquerade here is pretty bland. Part of it's lack of liveliness from the participants, the music, and the costuming, and then another part is how dreadfully dark it is. Like, I know it's midnight, but someone please turn some lights on in this place. I do appreciate how Bouquet has no more cares to give about the Phantom and how he's likely a dead man after drinking himself into bliss. Like, yeah, speak the truth and carpe diem while you can. You know your red scarf has trope significance, and there he goes. At least he died as he lived, drunk. I have to wonder though, why are all the girls wearing red except Christine? Jerry gets away with always wearing black because she's probably a widow and that's just what Jerry wears in most versions. But that doesn't explain the white dress Christine wears. If you're going to have a color code, at least adhere to it. That's all I'm saying. I like how the Phantom stalks about the party, obviously looking to murder Bouquet, just reveling in the whispers about him.
Perhaps he has come to hear me sing.
Okay, that's legit funny. While I disagree with him, his hate boner for Carlotta is a little amusing. Still, this is just rude. It bothers me how the dancing extras just dash out from behind the stairs. It just makes it so obvious that they're only in the scene to fill the stage and nothing more. I sort of appreciate Christine working through her conflicted feelings about the Phantom and what she loves about living a conventional life. Wanting to not be watched at all times and fearing she's trapped forever in the grips of someone who won't give her the option to not consent. She wants to experience the traditional romance blossoming with Rawl, but there's a part of her that is receptive to what the Phantom promises, that wants to embrace the fire awoken in her through her lessons. But she also knows that what the Phantom is doing is not okay. She doesn't owe him her body and soul for learning to sing, and he has no right to demand such things of her, especially when he's not being fully honest with her. Whereas Rawl also fears losing her, but doesn't demand she gives up everything she loves to be with him as the Phantom has. And Rawl clearly has no clue what she's on about and can only respond with,
You are the one, all I need.
It's not even, don't worry, I'll protect you, that we get in the Andrew Lloyd Webber version. Instead, it's just, I don't know what you're on about, but I love you. He just chalks her waxing about not being truly alone to her needing to accept being a performer means that her fans will form parasocial relationships with her just like Rawl did. But it's like, okay, as long as he's the one she comes home to every night. Of course, the Phantom doesn't support this ship either, though for more personal reasons. I guess this is good time as any to talk about the Persian, known in this version as Daroga. He's a very troubled character coming from a troubled trope in media that is well explained by Lindsay Ellis's video regarding Orientalism and Phantom adaptations. I recommend giving that video a watch to understand the uncomfortable space the Persian exists in with regard to the Phantom of the Opera and Western media's love for othering foreigners. I don't think Daroga's character here is the most offensive that it's been. Looking at you, Susan K. But there's something about his characterization that makes me uncomfortable. Like, uncomfortable in that way that you watch The King and I for the first time as someone who knows nothing of Thai history or culture, but still get the vague feeling of what you're watching is probably very racist. Like, while sometimes finding the humor with Daroga funny, I also can't help but wonder if he sometimes acts as comic relief because he's not French, so there's bound to be shenanigans in trying to communicate, or if it's because dumb foreigner dumb. Throughout the musical, we see the Persian trying to warn everyone about the Phantom and trying to keep one step behind him, but then in a matter of life or death, the show has Daroga pick the wrong rope and almost get Rawl killed, then plays his lack of reaction to Rawl's anger as a joke.
You said the one on the left I could have been killed. What's the matter with you?
I am feeling fine, thank you very much.
I mean, if the character was actually written as a Persian, why wouldn't he refer to his Persian language as Farsi? Still, I do like how he often acts as one of the only people who know what's going on and tries to get the other characters to stop running headfirst into their deaths like Bouquet. We see him throughout the show poking about, trying to gather information on the Phantom and somehow keep this chaotic company out of harm's way. I also like how he's got this weird love-hate relationship with the Phantom. Like, they've got history together, and if he wasn't tasked with chasing the Phantom, they could be bros. It's heartwarming to see Daroga pick the Phantom up after Christine leaves him and sort of distracts him from the pain by being like, hey, I'm gonna get you. Speaking of the ending, I actually like most of it. I love watching as Christine and the Phantom debate the merits of a normal life above ground and one hidden away in the cellars. That perhaps he's forgotten the sun and the rain in his pursuit of solitary bliss. He may be rejected by society, but does that give him the right to force Christine into hiding as well? He wants her to save him, but does she not have a choice in the matter? We see her pity him while also trying to make it clear that she cannot love a man who tells her to just accept what he says. And then Rawl comes to challenge the Phantom, but the Phantom, still believing that his burning passion is the only pursuit worth living for, trusts that Christine will feel the same. He cannot understand how she feels or accept that it's reasonable to not agree with him, so he assumes that given the chance, Christine would still choose him, regardless of her previous protests. But she doesn't. The Phantom's hubris and inability to care about someone other than himself blinds him to how miserable he's made the woman he loves. People have complained that this ending is anticlimactic because he just lets her go, and from a narrative standpoint, I agree. This is not exciting, but from a character standpoint, it makes total sense. The Phantom believes fully that Christine is like him and will choose perfect music over a conventional life. He thinks he doesn't need to hold her prisoner because she'll always choose him. But he has to learn the hard way that he's not endeared himself to Christine in the way that he thought. As Christine says herself, she does feel for him. Sorrow, pity, and a respect for his passion for beauty. But that's not the same thing as love or endearment to the point of ignoring all the wrong he's done to her. The musical tries to get all philosophical about how true passion leads to true insanity, that perfect music can't exist in an imperfect world, and that not everyone can devote themselves to making perfect music, otherwise society will crumble. But honestly, these are pretty weak morals and only crop up at the end of the show as a sort of, if you want to take away your wrap-up, here you go. In the Lloyd Webber version, the main focus is melodrama. How pitiful it is to be the Phantom and to be shunned by a society for a face you never asked for. That even though we feel for him, we still can't support his abuse of Christine and the killing he's done. And then swoon at the ultimate sacrifice out of love he shows in letting Christine go happily ever after with Rawl. In this one, I'm not really sure what the point is. Again, the musical half-heartedly attempts to make a statement against shirking societal obligations and rejecting a normal life to pursue beauty and pleasure, but it ends up shallow when Rawl tries to give this moral because the Phantom isn't a good demonstration about why it's bad. This facet of him seems but a side characterization because, at the end of the day, we know he'll never be able to lead a normal life even if he tried to because of his face. There is no changing course for the Phantom. Whatever he does, regular people will see him as a monster for his deformity. I'm not even sure if the show wants us to relate to the Phantom. While he does have a song resenting his destiny to never share the art he creates, the story still seems to treat him just like a madman in other parts. I mean, it says something that one of the supposed good guys directly says that his pursuit of true beauty leads to true insanity. That's not to say that it's impossible to like or even relate to the guy. I know I and others in my life do. But it's not certain that the musical wants you to. If anything, I guess this musical is saying be a productive member of society instead of dedicating your entire life to producing and perfecting your art because in society you can feel the sun and not be shunned? Honestly, I'd pick the Phantom's lifestyle if I could afford it. I'm also not a fan of catching up with Rawl and Christine after they flee. Like, it's not necessary to hear Christine come out and say that she didn't think she was in true danger and that she feels for the Phantom, or have the two reaffirm their intention to pursue a romantic relationship. It'd actually be more satisfying to end with the Phantom evading Daroga, and we're left with the question of what's next for the guy. But in this version, we know what's next for him. Apparently, he's got a thing for ballet dancers now. So how is this a prequel to Love Never Dies? First of all, there's not a lot you need to change to go from this musical to the next. Raul is already pretty slimy, and we don't know anything about who he is at home. All we see of the guy is him briefly at the beach, listening to Christine sing, asking her to the party, meeting her at the party and learning about the Phantom-y stuff, and then immediately going in to save her. Nothing character-wise to build off of, because he mainly reacts for the purpose of moving the plot, and I think I pulled out more from the character than the musical even meant to give. And his rescuing Christine can come off more as, "Give me back my woman," than, "Don't you see Christine doesn't want to be kidnapped and made your wife?" Not to mention he's already good at passive-aggressive manipulation. So it's not a stretch to imagine him becoming an abusive drunk who forced his family into the life of beggar nobles. And he'll always be haunted by the fact that Christine admitted to feeling for the Phantom and that a part of her connects to his passion for beauty. For Christine, she says herself that she knew she wasn't in real danger with the Phantom. So I can imagine over the course of 10 years that she comes to romanticize their time together and the fire he instilled in her for perfect art. I can see this Christine realizing that she doesn't love this Raul who she barely knows and misses the music that she and the Phantom made enough to return to him as he was fleeing Paris, and then be conflicted when they reunite on Coney, feeling like she deserves her fate because she didn't choose the Phantom when she had the chance. Become overwhelmed by the ecstasy of singing one of his songs again enough to feel beautiful performing as she once did. There's not a lot you need to change about the Phantom to at least make the audience able to root for him either. Unlike in the Andrew Lloyd Webber show, here he only killed one guy who was annoying and a terrible actor anyways, and then did a little kidnapping. Nowhere near as bad as killing 2 people, plus whoever was under that chandelier, and threatening an entire opera house into submission, on top of still doing some kidnapping. I mean, he's still not perfect. But I can see someone hand-waving this Phantom over the other after a decade of distance from those events. He's just the right amount of dangerous, yet sometimes teddy bear that he can map onto the toothlessness of the Love Never Dies Phantom. He's also totally the type to get conflicted about his monstrous, not-so-beautiful face, and then run away after getting laid, and then angst about it for years. And then this Madame Giry seems totally the type who would stand the Phantom enough to help him to America and support his endeavors. To view him as a genius and encourage Meg to just do whatever he says in the hope that she'll be favored by him one day. We see it all over this musical already. Constantly, Madame Giry is helping the Phantom along in his goals by convincing Christine to accept the strange voice in her dressing room, trying to teach her to sing, attempting to stop Christine from going to the party with Raul, and waiving her concerns about the after effects of singing according to her lessons, and then humanizing him to the ballet girls as they spread rumors of his monstrousness. She clearly has some sort of respect for this man and would seemingly go to great lengths to assist him. Hell, I can see her being able to pull off the mental gymnastics required to blame Christine for leaving him for Raul. And then the ballet girl the Phantom is seen talking to at the end of the show? What if that's Meg? He sees a possible flame in her, tries to stoke it and use her as a replacement Christine, but finds that she's not Christine. She's Meg. Even if there is a passion for beauty within her, she cannot replace the one who already has his heart, no matter how much he tries. Egged on by her mother, Meg tries to curry favor with the Phantom as they make a life in Coney, but falls into the darkness we see in Love Never Dies as she too finds that she can't replace Christine. No, making this musical the prequel wouldn't fix most of the problems with Love Never Dies that I listed out in my previous video on it, but it sure alleviates some of them. It just maps better than using the original ALW show. But that's not to say that this is a good musical either. Honestly, a lot of it is hit and miss, and some songs I forget entirely, like the one the Phantom sings in the second layer scene. It spends a lot of time on scenes that ultimately don't matter and doesn't always have the best writing or the best people to perform it. I'm fascinated by the take on the Phantom's philosophy towards art and his trust that Christine will choose passion over conventional living, and I love Carlotta. This Carlotta still rules. I just wish it was surrounded by a better musical. It doesn't have the interest of melodrama that other versions have, which honestly is the main draw to the Phantom of the Opera story. Half the reason I'm fascinated with the canon, at least.